Good evening, everybody. This is meteorologist Andrew Pinero with this next weekend outlook forecast. Now, we do have a little bit of an interesting weekend ahead in both the precipitation and the temperatures. Well, first, let's take a look at the precipitation. So, right now, I'm going to switch over to my computer screen here. And with the computer screen, we're just looking at the radar at the moment. So we're still seeing most of the East Coast is pretty dry. The little bit of precipitation we had for today has made its way out pretty much. We do have some nice clearing behind it. A meteorological term for this was a wet faux. Faux pas is short for frontal passage, so we had a wet faux pas. So with this, that made its way through. We do also have clear air coming in for tomorrow. Now, the interesting part with tomorrow will be the temperatures as well, but we'll get to that. So we're dealing also with, in the middle of the country, this system here. This is what's going to be coming through for Sunday. And that's what's also that's what we were talking about, actually, if you watched my Games and Storms live stream on Tuesday. That is where we have, Raymond, if you were watching this, that's where we have the high shear but low cape event. Because in terms of shape of the forecast models, we'll look at them now. Well, also from what we were looking at on Tuesday, it's very narrow. And with that very narrow shape, it tends to lead towards thunderstorms if we were a bit later in the spring when it was a bit warmer. But because it's colder right now, we were, at least from the last video, going from the 50s to the 30s on either side of the cold front. That's just not enough energy with the temperature. And that's what CAPE is, convective available potential energy. There's just not enough there. There may be some shear, and we'll take a look at the Storm Prediction Center too. So we'll get to that in a second. We'll have right here, that's going to be our system. If we take a look at the satellite image, it's a really cool look throughout all of this. But you can see this is a pretty big storm that's coming through here. Ignoring that, there's a pretty big storm coming through, or pretty big system. It's extending, at least with the cloud cover, for a while. With the radar, it doesn't look as big. We may be getting a little bit of tapping into some Gulf of Mexico moisture, but we'll look at that at the forecast models. So that's between the satellite and the radar, and here is the surface analysis. So this is showing this big stationary front turning into a little bit of a cold front, and high pressure really on either side. That is what's coming in for our area in the Northeast tomorrow. The other thing I want to look at is the Storm Prediction Center for Sunday. Let's see what they say. So kind of what we were thinking with the Cape. And the forecast models on Tuesday were really showing the Cape more south. This is showing the line is still going to be there throughout all of the East Coast, but in the Northeast, there's just not enough Cape for that event. You start getting into that Cape once you get into North Carolina, enough to just trigger some thunderstorms, and categorically, they're showing just regular thunderstorms, nothing in terms of severe. So that's what I was curious what the Storm Prediction Center would do. So now let's start taking a look at these forecast models. Here, this is the GFS from today, 18Z, so that was 2 p.m. now that we're in daylight saving time. And then we have clearing for the overnight. Now this first system is really going to be jetting over us in the Northeast for the most part, except if you're in western New York and western Pennsylvania, Ohio. But also, if you see, pretty much getting into Canada, that's where that rain-snow line is. And as this starts to approach, so this is your day on Saturday. Windy because of this high pressure gradient, but dry. And then when we start going into Sunday, so from Sunday morning, it looks pretty fine on the GFS here. By Sunday afternoon, that's when we're starting to see some showers. It doesn't look too heavy, but a bit more northwest. We are seeing some of this wraparound snow behind it. And that's where, with the snow, I really don't think it's going to be anything in terms of accumulation. And I'll show you that here. We're going to go total positive snow depth change. So through even just the United States, Finger Lakes, Buffalo area, this is showing 4 inches. Anywhere else is really just a little coating or nothing at all. More into Canada, where you have that colder air, getting up near a foot of snow over the weekend. Let me switch back to these. And on here, once that system passes through, these blue lines, those are thickness lines. And that's where we do kind of relate the temperature and the thickness together. That 540 line, it's not exactly the freezing line at this time of the year, but it's pretty close right now. And this is showing a lot of cold air advection coming through. So we first have a lot of warm air advection. Because remember, we have counterclockwise rotation around low pressure systems in the northern hemisphere. So we have a lot of southerly flow coming in. That's key. And then once the front passes, the faux we have a lot of cold air coming through. And that cold air is going to bring us back down to kind of what we don't want. So that was a GFS. The icon here. So that was the showers from today. And it clears out overnight. Going into tomorrow, doesn't look too bad. Just windy with that high pressure gradient for Saturday. And then going into Sunday, the rain really doesn't start here until mid-morning, or late morning, I should say. And then by the afternoon, that's really when it's passing through. But if you also notice, it's a little bit narrower. And this is still the same trend that we were looking at the beginning of this week. The icon was a bit more tight together. And this is seeing a bit more intense snow. In some areas, a bit more north. I'd say even north of Albany. And then it turns to rain pretty much. And then behind that, the cold air advection drops those temperatures. But let's take a look at the snow depth. Total snowfall, true snow liquid ratio. We'll let that pop in. There we go. So yeah, this is showing a little bit more. A little bit more meaning 3 inches. And that is very far north into New York State, near the Canada border. It's not showing that really high amount, like the GFS was showing up to a foot of snow over the weekend there. Not here. This is showing 4 or 5 inches of snow. And then that's really it. There's not much more accumulation at all from this. So let's switch back here. Oh, we're too far. We're not looking at that yet. Yeah, this is really just showing mostly a rain event. Warm surge, warm air advection, a little bit of showers, maybe some snow more north at the New York-Canada border. And then behind that, cold air advection. So that's the icon. The last one I want to show you here is the NAM. So let's see what the NAM shows. It still shows that high pressure gradient for tomorrow, so it's going to be windy. And then for Sunday, it's also showing late morning. It's starting, going into the afternoon. Maybe some more moderate showers, so a little bit more intense on the NAM. But in terms of snow, not really as much in the beginning there, yeah, but then it starts to taper off. And then by the time we get to Sunday afternoon, it's pretty much gone. It's a quick mover, very thin line on this. And then behind that, this doesn't show the thickness lines, but we can see the high pressure here, and we have clockwise rotation in the northern hemisphere with a high pressure, so that's bringing in northerly winds, cold air straight from Canada. So that's where we're going from here. With the low pressure system, we got the counterclockwise rotation, southerly flow. So once that passes, we have northerly flow around the high pressure. So pretty strong drop of temperatures we could see going the end of the weekend, going into the beginning of next week. So the last thing I want to show you before we wrap up the video is the moss. So we're going to go into here. And the moss data, which is really text output. So starting with Newark, 71 for a high, 65. So the MAV is the GFS. The MET is the NAM. So a 65 and a 71. And then for Islip, Long Island, a 65 and a 59. And then for White Plains, we have a 63 and a 60. So this is where we could see pretty much everywhere in the 60s, except once you get a bit more north into the Hudson Valley, maybe the upper 50s to maybe just near the low 60s. But I'm going to say specifically here, around the New York City area, around New Jersey, it is possible we could be in those mid to upper 60s to possibly the low 70s. It's going to feel really nice with the temperatures, but we got to look at those winds. The wind speed going into tomorrow, especially in the afternoon, this is sustained wind, so we're seeing around 10 to 15 mile per hour sustained wind, meaning those gusts can get up near 20. So it's not strong, it's not very strong, but it's something you got to keep in mind. The same thing here with the wind speed. This is a little bit lower on the wind speed with the NAM. And then here we're still getting in the 10 to 15 mile per hour. That's sustained wind, so yeah, it could be a little bit breezy, but again, those temperatures. All right, I am going to switch back to my main camera. And overall, for this weekend, it's going to be a very interesting weekend. Tomorrow's going to be extremely mild. Again, in those 60s to the 70s, but a little bit windy. Dry for the most part. Then, going into Sunday. Sunday morning, maybe mid to late morning, that's when we're going to start to see that cold front pass through. So we're going to start seeing some showers from, again, mid to late morning, starting through the afternoon hours. And then once that cold front makes its way through, then we could be seeing those temperatures drop, because still, for Sunday, the temperatures are in the 50s and the 60s. For the most part there. So yeah, we're seeing around 70 in some areas to the 60s and 50s for Sunday. And then it drops off quite a bit going into Monday. Highs only in the upper 40s to the low 50s. So we're going to go from, say, 70 on Saturday to 50 on Monday. Quite a big temperature swing, and that's kind of what we're seeing in the spring and the fall times, these roller coastering of temperatures. So it may feel like late spring is going to be upon us just for a couple days, because then it's going to be dropping off again going into Monday. So that pretty much wraps up this video, this weekend outlook. We did a little bit more in-depth just because we have an interesting weekend ahead. I hope you enjoyed, and some channel updates as well. I hope you enjoyed also yesterday, the Full Throttle Thursday with the spring, especially with these temperatures. Should you have winter tires on? Should you have summer tires on? I got more Full Throttle Thursday videos planned for you guys. Spectra's coming along pretty well, and I think I may actually have time this week to finally get my 2018 Rewind out. Oh, a couple months late, maybe 4 months late, but I'm going to still try and get that out for you guys. So again, this is meteorologist Andrew Pinero. I hope you have a great weekend, and I will see you all in the next video.